The goddess, concerned about the destruction of nature caused by humanity, decided to impose a test on the world. To prevent humans from continuing to harm the natural balance, she created a challenge that would determine the fate of civilization. Suddenly, dungeons began to appear in various parts of the planet. These mysterious structures contained dangers and challenges that needed to be overcome. However, there was a condition: if certain results were not achieved within these dungeons, all of humanity would be doomed to annihilation. Faced with this imminent threat, a young man with a determined look walked under the starry sky, wearing a stylized uniform. The weight of responsibility fell on him, as the fate of humanity now depended on overcoming this divine challenge. In front of an imposing modern building, a young man with a radiant expression showed his hand, where a mysterious symbol was marked. His enthusiasm was evident as he shared the news of becoming an explorer. Another boy, named Hinata, watched the mark with surprise, amazed by his friend's achievement. His words showed disbelief and excitement at what he saw. Meanwhile, a third young man, blond and excited, approached with energy, giving Hinata a motivating pat on the back. His gesture showed encouragement, reinforcing the importance of putting in effort as well. The mood between them was one of friendship and enthusiasm for the future. The blond young man, with a confident expression, approached, whispering provocative words into the ear of the dark-haired boy. For someone at level 0 like him, becoming an explorer would be simply impossible. His sharp gaze and smug smile made his contempt clear. While hearing these words, the boy tensed, feeling the weight of reality. Since the dungeons appeared on Earth, society had been governed by a level system, where the stronger dominated the weaker. This new ruthless world had completely transformed the way people lived. He knew exactly where he fit into this cruel system, at the bottom of the hierarchy, being the weakest of all. And still, despite this overwhelming reality, he dared to proclaim himself an explorer. Inside a classroom, a group of students laughed loudly, mocking the dark-haired boy. The blonde, leading the teasing, laughed openly while questioning the possibility of him becoming an explorer. To him, the idea was absurd. The boy, somewhat hesitant, admitted the possibility that they were right. After all, being considered the weakest in the world, how could he even think of entering a dungeon? His level was 0, and his potential was classified as the lowest, in category F. In the eyes of others, he was nothing but a lost cause. However, amid the teasing, a spark of determination emerged. With a slight smile, he hinted that, despite his level still being low, things could change from that moment onward. His response surprised the blonde, who reacted with astonishment, not expecting such a statement. For a long time, the 0-level young man had been ridiculed and despised by those around him. His status made him a constant target for humiliation, and mockery was something he had become used to. What Kai said now was not new to him. To escape this suffocating environment, he made a drastic decision. He left his hometown and enrolled in Seishin High School, hoping to start anew. However, his reputation preceded him, and quickly everyone discovered that he was still a level 0. On his way to school, the same blonde boy from before laughed loudly, mocking him once again. With a sarcastic tone, he announced the arrival of the eternal level 0, Hinata-sama, drawing the attention of other students. The young man sighed, resigned to the situation, lamenting the fact that he had to face Kai there as well. Even so, something inside him still resisted. The young man watched intently as a board displayed the ranking of the day's explorers. This ranking showed the names of those who had excelled in the dungeons, recognizing the top 100 as true heroes. Despite his desire to explore, he knew that the challenges inside the dungeons were deadly, filled with monsters and dangers. Moreover, forming a group seemed impossible, as no one would be willing to accept someone with level 0. As he reflected on his situation, some people around reacted with surprise upon seeing someone in the distance. The shock was evident, and the gazes turned toward this mysterious figure. Among them, a young woman with long hair showed astonishment as she noticed the presence of this person, her wide eyes reflecting the surprise of the moment. On the school campus, murmurs and admiring looks turned toward an imposing figure walking with confidence. The young woman with long blonde hair attracted the attention of everyone around her. Her name was Hinata, and her status was legendary among the students. Rumors spread quickly. They said she had S-rank potential, being considered the strongest among the students. Additionally, she had already joined the student council, further increasing her influence at the school. For many, she was an unattainable presence. Among the observers, some commented on her lineage, noting that she was the daughter of the leader of the Camui clan, making her position even more respectable. Others, more stunned by her beauty and prestige, wondered if they would have any chance of getting close, harboring naive hopes of securing a meeting. However, Hinata continued her walk, indifferent to the reactions around her. Inside the classroom, the atmosphere was tense as the students introduced themselves in order. The 0-level young man, upon entering, encountered an intimidating presence sitting in front of him. It was Kamui Hinata, the strongest student in the school. The shock on his face was evident as he recognized her. He took the seat right behind her, immediately feeling the piercing gazes of the other students. The weight of expectations and judgments weighed on him, making the environment even more suffocating. When it was Hinata's turn to introduce herself, her firm and controlled voice echoed through the room. Everyone paid attention to her, admiring her unshakable posture. The silence that followed only reinforced her authority in the place. Meanwhile, the young man continued to feel anxious, realizing he had gotten involved in something much bigger than he had expected. The atmosphere in the classroom remained tense as the introductions continued. When it was the zero-level young man's turn, he stood up abruptly, visibly nervous. With an expression of pure panic, he announced his name aloud, Suzuki Hinata. The brief silence in the room was quickly broken by murmurs and surprised looks. Some students wondered why he was so agitated, while others discreetly laughed at the situation. The teacher, impassive, simply continued with the roll call. Suzuki, still trying to control his nervousness, added a few words about his origin and his indecision regarding which club to join. He also awkwardly mentioned that he shared the same name as the S-rank student, Kamui Hinata, a detail that only added to the oddness of the situation. On the other side of the room, Kamui Hinata listened to his introduction without showing any apparent emotion, merely observing the scene with indifference. Suzuki, for his part, hoped that his embarrassment would end soon, but the feeling of being judged by everyone remained strong. In front of the imposing dormitory building, Suzuki Hinata was impressed by its size and modern structure. While observing the place, a woman approached, calling his name. A bit surprised, he confirmed his identity. She introduced herself as Kanoko, the dormitory supervisor, and handed him a rulebook, instructing him to read it carefully. Her serious expression made it clear that she expected responsibility from him. Suzuki, somewhat flustered, absorbed the information and responded affirmatively, recognizing the importance of the supervisor. However, the weight of responsibility began to be felt, as now someone was relying on him in this new environment. In the dormitory cafeteria, the new residents gathered for a welcome meeting. Suzuki Hinata, remembering the event, realized he needed to organize himself better, starting by arranging his things before engaging in any other activities. Meanwhile, a group of students discussed forming teams. An enthusiastic girl suggested that, since they had similar levels, they could form a group together. Her excitement was quickly matched by a boy who was also looking for companions. The decision was made quickly, but one of the students seemed confused, realizing she didn't exactly know who she was associating with. Despite the surprise, the proposal had already been accepted by the others, consolidating the new team amid the excitement of the participants. In the cafeteria, Suzuki Hinata introduced himself to his classmates, trying to keep his composure. However, when he revealed his rank, a silence fell over the room. His level was F, the lowest possible. The reaction was immediate, and some students were surprised, questioning how he managed to enroll in Seishin High School, an institution that favored explorers. As he reflected on this, he himself didn't know how he had been accepted. The school favored students with potential for the dungeons, and it was rare for someone without abilities to live in the dorms. One of the students commented on this out loud, further increasing the atmosphere of doubt and distrust surrounding Suzuki. One of the girls, embarrassed by the situation, apologized for the other's reaction, trying to ease the tension. However, an attentive gaze rested on Suzuki. One of the students, noticing his hands covered by gloves, questioned whether he wore them to hide his true level. The young man, caught off guard by the direct question, hesitated before responding. The explanation of the rank system was presented, highlighting that humanity had developed a method to measure potential capacity since birth. The maximum rank was S, while the minimum was F, and this system determined the perspectives of an explorer. While some exalted the rarity and power of rank S, one of the students explained that having low potential didn't necessarily mean being weak. Even A-rank explorers could fail in their progress. This surprised Suzuki Hinata, who didn't fully understand what that meant for his own situation. One of the students reinforced the point that, even with an F rank, he could still stand out. After all, potential was just an initial indicator, not an absolute limit. What really mattered to become strong was the level difference gained over time. Upon this revelation, Suzuki froze, processing the new information. For the first time, he considered that maybe his initial ranking wasn't the end of his journey, but rather a starting point. In the cafeteria, the conversation about the level system continued. Some students encouraged the idea that anyone could improve as long as they worked hard and leveled up. However, another point was raised: no one had ever heard of an F-rank person achieving success. While the others shared their own levels ranging from 4, 5, and 6, Suzuki Hinata reflected on his situation. He already knew his position was the worst possible, but being confronted directly with this harsh reality made it even harder to accept. Later, lying in his bed at the dormitory, he stared at the ceiling, lost in thought. His status wasn't just F rank, but also level 0, an abnormal value, as everyone normally started at level 1. This realization only reinforced the feeling of being in a position impossible to overcome. Still, something inside him refused to give up. While in his room, Suzuki Hinata looked at the screen of his phone, where a message from his younger sister appeared. She asked if he had already gotten used to the new school and mentioned her own wish to join Seishin High School next year. He had asked her not to contact him for a while, but still, her message reached him, reigniting thoughts of his motivations. One of the main reasons he decided to enter Seishin High School was the desire to provide a better life for his mother and sister. Becoming an explorer meant a chance to earn a lot of money and ensure the comfort of his family. However, reality was harsh. His level and rank were the worst possible, and the prospects of success seemed far away. Lying in bed, he pondered about his future and the difficulties he would face if he continued at this pace. But, even amidst these uncertainties, the memory of his sister and his goals reignited something within him. With a sudden impulse, he got up with determination, declaring to himself that he couldn't give up. Suzuki Hinata filled himself with determination, refusing to accept his fate as a level 0. He couldn't face his sister or his family with this weakness. If defeating monsters inside a dungeon was the only way to evolve, then he would have to try, no matter the risk. With a firm look and clenched fists, he reaffirmed his decision. He couldn't give up now. No matter how low his rank was, he was determined to move forward. Before him, the entrance to Dungeon E117 loomed, dark and mysterious. Guards stood watch, emphasizing the seriousness of the challenge. Suzuki, however, did not back down. It was time to act, to challenge the impossible, and prove that even a level 0 could fight for a better future. Before departing, Suzuki Hinata received some words of advice from Supervisor Kanoko. She warned him about the importance of preserving his life above all else. As an explorer, his greatest challenge was not only to level up but also to survive. Even more determined, he responded enthusiastically, accepting the challenge ahead. The nearest dungeon for beginners was E117, and that was where he was headed. Upon arriving at the registration desk, he tried to get someone's attention. However, the place was quiet, with no immediate sign of assistance. Still, his determination did not waver. He was ready to take the first step into the unknown. At the dungeon reception, a nervous and somewhat clumsy receptionist greeted Suzuki Hinata. She quickly noticed his uniform and confirmed that he was from Seishin High School, asking if this was his first time. He confirmed, and the receptionist prepared to grant him his explorer's license. However, while searching for the box with the necessary registration items, she realized she had misplaced something. Desperate, she started looking for the object, wondering where she could have left it. Her distraction caught the attention of another staff member, who scolded her for her disorganization. Meanwhile, Suzuki waited, curiously observing the process. Eventually, a special crystal was brought. This object was used to assess the explorer's potential, with its color indicating their rank. With a mix of apprehension and expectation, Suzuki prepared to see the results of this test once again. Suzuki Hinata placed his hand on the crystal, feeling the energy around him. He already knew the result, but still, a mix of anticipation and apprehension filled him. The crystal, which would normally shine in a color indicating the user's potential, remained as black as the darkness. He remembered the previous explanations. The potential had color, and it was based on that color that ranks were assigned. However, if the crystal turned completely black, it meant there was no color, no potential. This was the mark of someone with level 0. A status that, in practice, meant the complete absence of ability or growth. As if his existence were being devoured by the darkness, erased before it even began. As he faced that frustrating result once more, Suzuki felt the weight of his reality. But he had already made a decision. No matter what that crystal said, he would not give up. Before the black crystal, Suzuki Hinata felt a mixture of frustration and disbelief. His body trembled as his mind echoed the inevitable question, why did this happen to me? It was a fate that seemed inescapable, a mark that placed him at the lowest level of all. As he tried to process the reality, the receptionist returned happily, holding a board with a document. With a radiant smile, she announced her return but quickly noticed that the reception was empty. She wondered if everyone had gone home, unaware of the heavy atmosphere in the air. Suzuki, still absorbing his own fate, remained still, feeling the weight of his classification. He couldn't change that result, but his determination to move forward remained within him. Suddenly, Suzuki Hinata was overcome by a strange sensation. His body trembled as something around him seemed to distort. Before he could react, a black vortex pulled him forcefully, tearing him away from reality. Panic took hold of him as he fell uncontrollably, his wide eyes reflecting the terror of the unknown. The world around him turned into a dark void, and the only thing echoing in his mind was the desperate question, was he falling to hell? As he tried to reach out for something to hold onto, his silhouette disappeared into the darkness, swallowed by an uncertain fate. Suzuki Hinata slowly regained consciousness. The darkness around him was thick, making it difficult to see anything. For a moment, he still felt like he was falling, but when he looked down, he saw his feet firmly on the ground. Confused, he tried to understand what had happened. Where was he? Before him, a shadowy figure rose against the starry sky, a mysterious castle in the midst of an unknown vastness. Suddenly, a message appeared before him: Lucifer's fall has been analyzed. Another notification indicated that a skill called Dungeon Information was being activated. Not fully understanding what this meant, he was even more surprised when a new alert appeared. Due to the difficulties faced, you have acquired the skill, Dungeon Information. His eyes widened in shock. Something had changed. For the first time, even being level 0, he had acquired a skill. Suzuki Hinata tried to understand his situation. Everything indicated that he had been transported inside a dungeon. The mention of Lucifer's fall made him wonder if this was the phenomenon that brought him here. As he thought, a new notification appeared. Due to the difficulties faced, you have acquired the skill, Surrounding Exploration. He was even more surprised now he had another skill. But before he could process the information, something strange happened to his body. A disturbing sensation took over him, and his hand began to contort unnaturally. The intense pain made him scream, and he instinctively grabbed his own arm, trying to contain the agonizing feeling. Another notification appeared. Due to the difficulties faced, you have acquired the skill, Resistance to Foreign Objects. His body seemed to be reacting to the hostile environment in an unknown way. He gasped, sweating cold. Something was definitely happening to him, and now, more than ever, he needed to figure out what this dungeon was and how to get out alive. Suzuki Hinata collapsed to the ground, his body trembling as an overwhelming sensation took over him. Something was wrong. A notification appeared before his eyes. Due to the difficulties faced, you have acquired the skill, Resistance to Abnormal States. He tried to move, but the intense pain made every muscle resist. His despair grew as he stretched out his trembling hand, seeking help. Ask someone. His voice was weak, almost a whisper, as his vision began to fade. Then, more notifications appeared. His new skill was rapidly evolving: Resistance to Abnormal States, Resistance to Status Alterations, Medium. And it continued: Resistance to Abnormal States, High, Resistance to Abnormal States, Very High, until it finally reached Immunity to Abnormal States. He panted on the ground, trying to understand what was happening. His body, once consumed by suffering, now seemed different. As if it were adapting to everything that tried to destroy him. But why? What exactly was happening to him inside this dungeon? Suzuki Hinata's eyes suddenly opened. He found himself lying in his bed at the dormitory. His breath was rapid, and his heart was still pounding. Confused, he sat up, looking around. Everything seemed normal. My room. Was it a dream? The doubt echoed in his mind as he tried to understand what had happened. He clearly remembered the pain, the terror of the darkness, and the evolution of his skills inside the dungeon. But now, he was back, as if nothing had happened. Slowly getting up, he muttered a momentary relief. If someone passes out in a dungeon, it means certain death. The simple fact of being alive was already surprising. However, when he extended his hand, something felt strange. A chill ran down his spine. Something was different. Could it really have been a dream, or something much more real than he was willing to admit? Suzuki Hinata held his head, trying to understand his situation. He was still inside the dungeon. How long had he been unconscious? And that strange voice earlier mentioned something about skills. Suddenly, a new notification appeared. You have acquired the skill list, due to the difficulties faced. He was surprised again. Again? How was this possible? He had never heard of anyone gaining skills this way. Before his eyes, a glowing panel materialized, displaying a detailed list of skills. Some were active, like Surrounding Exploration, while others were passive, like Resistance to Foreign Substances, Immunity to Abnormal States, Vitality Recovery, Medium, and Hunger Resistance. Confused, he tried to understand what was happening. Do I get new skills automatically every time something happens? It seemed surreal, as if he were inside a game. But there was no time for doubts. The only certainty he had now was that something was changing inside him, and he needed to figure out what it meant before it was too late. Suzuki Hinata moved cautiously through the dungeon, not knowing if this place was truly safe. His newly acquired skill, Surrounding Exploration, proved useful, allowing him to notice details around him, like a map emerging in his peripheral vision. The air around him was charged with extreme levels of poison and paralysis, something that could be fatal for any other explorer. However, thanks to his immunity to abnormal states, he was able to resist without being affected. As he walked, his memories of an old dungeon beginner's guide resurfaced, warning him about traps. Normally, F-rank dungeons wouldn't be too dangerous, but this place seemed different. Suddenly, a new skill awakened, night vision, granted due to the difficulties faced. His vision drastically improved, allowing him to see clearly in the dark. Now, he could see the stars and the imposing castle in the distance, increasing his curiosity and caution about what he might encounter ahead. Suzuki Hinata continued exploring the dungeon when he spotted a small lake surrounded by rocks and dense vegetation. Feeling his throat dry, he realized the relief of finding water, even though his hunger resistance minimized the need for food. Approaching the shore, he knelt down and scooped up some water with his hands. However, due to his night vision, the liquid's color seemed strange. Still, ignoring any hesitation, he brought the water to his mouth and drank quickly, prioritizing the need to hydrate. As much as he knew the hidden dangers of a dungeon, at that moment, his thirst was stronger than his caution. As soon as Suzuki Hinata drank the water, a horrible taste filled his mouth, forcing him to spit it out immediately. His instincts warned him of possible danger, but his environmental exploration skill didn't indicate any threat from the water, meaning that despite the awful taste, it wasn't poisonous. Before he could reflect further on this, a notification appeared informing him that, due to the imminent danger, his Vitality Recovery, medium, skill had evolved into Vitality Recovery, high. His body prepared for a possible confrontation. Something was wrong. Looking around, he began to suspect that monsters might be approaching. Suddenly, a jet of water shot violently in his direction, forcing him to retreat. The danger had become real. Something was lurking in the darkness, and now, Hinata needed to act fast to survive. The water Suzuki Hinata drank turned out to be poisonous. A jet of liquid exploded violently, spreading throughout the environment. If it weren't for his immunity to abnormal states, he would have surely been in grave danger. Taking a deep breath, he recognized that once again he had been saved by this skill. The dungeon was no ordinary place, and he couldn't continue acting recklessly. Determined to avoid further mistakes, he moved with more caution, navigating through rocks and dense vegetation. The distant castle remained his only point of reference. Now, more than ever, he understood that surviving here would require more than just luck. Suzuki Hinata had already walked quite a distance through the dungeon but still hadn't found an exit. Fatigue was starting to build up, but his mind remained filled with questions. He didn't even have an explorer's license, so how had he been able to enter here? Something didn't make sense. While he pondered, a chill ran down his spine. His body reacted instinctively, as if something was approaching. His senses sharpened, and an oppressive feeling filled the atmosphere. The sound of something moving echoed throughout the place, and his breathing quickened. There was something there. His heart pounded as his eyes searched for the source of the threat. Could it be a monster? He wasn't sure, but one thing was clear. He was about to face something for the first time in this dungeon. Suzuki Hinata froze when the monstrous presence finally revealed itself. Before him, a colossal creature emerged from the darkness. Its eyes glowed intensely, and its sharp fangs gleamed in the weak dungeon light. Shock overtook him. This couldn't be real. The size of the creature, its intimidating aura, and the threatening sound of its heavy breathing made it clear that he wasn't facing a common enemy. His heart raced. How could a monster of this level be in a beginner's dungeon? Nothing made sense. The pure instinct for survival screamed inside him, but his body hesitated, paralyzed by fear. If he didn't react quickly, he wouldn't stand a chance against that deadly threat. In front of the monstrous creature, Suzuki Hinata tried to understand what was happening. Normally, weaker monsters should appear first in a dungeon, but this being didn't fit that pattern. He considered the possibility that it was the floor's boss or even an irregular, an exceptionally powerful creature that appeared outside of the normal dungeon parameters. Either way, he knew he had no chance against something of that level. Deciding to slowly retreat, he planned to wait for the monster to disappear before making any sudden movements. However, before he could react, something caught his attention. A hidden eye within the creature's body opened and fixed directly on him. His heart raced. He had been noticed. The hope of escaping unnoticed crumbled, and now, he was facing a real nightmare. The monster finally advanced, roaring in fury and displaying its sharp fangs. Suzuki Hinata didn't need anything more to understand the gravity of the situation. He needed to run immediately. His body moved purely on instinct, darting in the opposite direction as the creature pursued him. The ground trembled with every step the monster took, and the pressure of its presence made it hard to even breathe. A notification appeared informing him that due to imminent danger, something was happening with his skills. But he didn't have time to worry about that now. His only chance was to run and find an exit before it was too late. Every second counted. If he hesitated, he'd be devoured right there. Suzuki Hinata ran with all his strength as the monster relentlessly chased him. With each step, he felt the pressure of the creature closing in, and the desperation grew. Suddenly, a new notification appeared. You've obtained the skill, Speed Boost. Soon after, another update indicated that, due to imminent danger, the skill had already evolved into Speed Boost Medium. His body responded instantly. His steps became faster, and his reflexes sharper. He was running at a speed he had never experienced before. Even so, the monster didn't give up and continued its fierce pursuit. With the path narrowing and rocky walls ahead, Hinata needed to find an escape before his advantage disappeared. If he made even one mistake, it would be his last run. Suzuki Hinata kept running desperately, but the monster was closing in rapidly, reducing his chance of escape. Desperation took hold as he realized his speed wasn't enough. Suddenly, a new notification appeared. Speed Boost evolved to High. His body reacted instantly, allowing him to gain more distance. However, the creature still didn't give up. Seconds later, another notification appeared. Speed Boost evolved to Very High. His acceleration reached an absurd level, and before he could fully comprehend what was happening, his body shot forward like never before. With a single thrust, he was launched far away, breaking speed barriers he never imagined possible. His movement became uncontrollable, and now, he wasn't just running to escape, he was being dragged by his newfound force. The frantic chase reached a new level when Suzuki Hinata's skill evolved again, becoming Speed Boost Hyperspeed. His body shot forward like lightning, leaving the creature behind in the blink of an eye. For a moment, he felt a relief he had finally escaped. However, his uncontrollable speed took him into a new environment. The terrain around him drastically changed, and soon he found himself in a dense forest, something unexpected within that dungeon. Even with his impressive acceleration, he realized that the place still had some influence over him. No matter how much his speed increased, it seemed that this place continued to shape his destiny. Now, lost in a new territory, he needed to figure out where he was before another threat emerged. Suzuki Hinata stopped running, panting, believing he had escaped the monster. However, when he looked up, his body froze. The creature was right in front of him. The giant monster stared at him with fierce eyes, its imposing body blocking any escape route. Every detail of its sharp fangs and tensed muscles made it clear that it had no intention of letting him leave alive. Sweat dripped down Hinata's face. His heart raced as he tried to process the situation. Even after all that speed, the monster had still caught up to him. Now, he had nowhere to run. The only option left was to survive. Suzuki Hinata was cornered. The monster slowly advanced, its overwhelming presence making the situation even more desperate. He had no place left to run. His instincts screamed at him to flee, but a new idea began to form in his mind. If he fought, perhaps he could awaken more skills. His body had already evolved multiple times in the face of danger. If he continued, he might have a real chance of winning. The fear was still there, but something inside him began to change. He couldn't die here. Clenching his fists, he decided to take the risk. If it was fight or die, then he would choose to fight. Preparing for the confrontation, a certainty grew inside him. He could do this. Suzuki Hinata advanced with determination, but the moment the monster opened its enormous mouth, reality hit him hard. It was impossible. The survival instinct took over, and fear dominated his body. He realized he had no chance against that creature. His mind screamed at him to run, but it was already too late. Suddenly, a crushing force descended from the sky. A brutal impact shook the ground, and the monster was sent flying with absurd violence. Hinata barely managed to understand what had happened. He looked up, his heart racing. What could be strong enough to knock that creature away with a single blow? Something even more powerful had entered the battle. Suzuki Hinata kept trying to escape, but his body no longer responded like it had before. He had run so much that his energy was almost depleted. While struggling to catch his breath, the creature advanced again, its roar echoing through the environment. Every step the monster took made the ground tremble, and Hinata knew he wouldn't be able to escape this time. However, a new attack came from another direction. Someone or something had entered the fight against the monster. The impact was brutal, and the shock of the forces created a wave of dust. Even exhausted, Hinata tried to understand what was happening. Was there another enemy, or had someone come to help him? All he knew was that his chance of survival depended on what happened in the next few seconds. Suzuki Hinata, on the brink of collapse, fought bravely against the creature's pursuit. In the midst of extreme danger, a new notification appeared. You've acquired the skill, Resistance Boost, due to the danger. Gradually, he noticed something strange. The monster, which had attacked without hesitation before, now hesitated. Why wasn't it advancing? Hinata wondered if the creature was tired or wounded. Then he noticed the environment around him. He was near a lake, but it wasn't an ordinary lake, it was the lake of mortal poison. If the monster had chased him here, there might be a chance to turn the tide. With this discovery, he had to act quickly. If he could use the location to his advantage, he might have a real chance to survive. Hinata realized there was a possible way to turn the situation in his favor. If the monster avoided the lake of mortal poison, perhaps he could use it as a weapon. He quickly scooped up some of the poison water, preparing to use it against the creature. The monster, paying attention to every movement, started to move cautiously, no longer charging as it had before. Looking into the beast's eyes, Hinata felt the tension rise. Would the plan work, or was he just delaying the inevitable? With the dangerous liquid in his hands, this might be his only chance to survive. The young man, cornered by the colossal monster, realized that running wasn't an option anymore. His body, exhausted from the long chase, trembled before the beast. However, in a moment of determination, he decided to use the environment to his advantage. With a quick movement, he threw the poison water at the creature, hoping it would be affected by the poison. The monster reacted violently, roaring in pain as the liquid made contact with its skin. The young man kept attacking, refining his technique as the battle intensified. The creature, enraged, advanced toward him, but now its movements were slower. The poison was beginning to take effect. With one final effort, the young man seized the opening and charged with everything he had. His strategy, combined with his newly acquired resistance and abilities, turned the tide. The monster, weakened, let out a final roar before falling. Panting, the young man stared at his defeated enemy, feeling a mix of relief and disbelief at his victory. The young man watched the fallen monster, surrounded by flames, but kept his guard up. He remembered the instructions from the beginner's guide for explorers, which warned about the danger of letting one's guard down too early. The body of the defeated enemy still moved slightly, a sign that it might not be completely finished. He took a deep breath, trying to recover the energy spent in the battle, as he assessed the remains of the creature. He thought about the usefulness of its bones and other materials, wondering if they could be used to help him survive in the hostile dungeon environment. Exhausted, the young man remained vigilant of his surroundings. The battle may have ended, but the danger of the unknown still lingered. He analyzed his newly acquired skills and realized that he had gained the monster dissection technique. He understood that this new skill was one of the active ones, meaning it needed to be used directly, unlike passive skills that were always in effect. As he examined his status panel, he noticed the benefits of his passive skills, like resistance to foreign objects, immunity to altered states, and night vision. He reflected on the importance of knowing when and how to use each of them. Determined to test his new technique, he activated the monster dissection skill, preparing to make the most of the fallen creature's remains. A glow of energy surrounded him as he focused on using his new power. After using the dissection skill, the young man was impressed by the amount of materials extracted from the defeated monster. Bones, skin, and other valuable resources were now before him, ready to be utilized. While examining the materials, his eyes fell upon a massive stone. He lifted it with effort and realized that it was a magical stone, a valuable resource used in generating energy and crafting magical weapons. However, something seemed odd. He remembered that in low-ranked dungeons, these stones usually didn't exceed 30 centimeters, but the one he found was absurdly large. Even without fully understanding the situation, he was excited about the possibility of selling the item for a great price, not yet realizing the true rarity and importance of what he had just acquired. The young man encountered a problem. How would he carry all the materials he had collected from the defeated monster? He thought about the need for something that would allow him to carry large amounts of items, like a magical backpack. While imagining this possibility, a thought crossed his mind. Could he acquire such a skill? To his surprise, he felt a shift in his status and gained the dimensional storage skill, allowing him to store items conveniently and effortlessly. Excited by this new acquisition, he celebrated his luck, now able to carry everything he found without worrying about weight or space. The young man explored his new dimensional storage skill, realizing that he could visualize the list of stored items and access them with just a thought. He experimented with storing and retrieving objects instantly, impressed by the skill's usefulness. However, when he tried to store some of the poisonous water from the lake, he realized a limitation: liquids couldn't be stored. This led him to reflect on the rules of the skill and whether there were any restrictions on items collected inside the dungeon itself. Despite his doubts, he decided not to waste time and moved forward, keeping his focus on exploration and survival. After the intense battle, the young man observed the lifeless body of the monster before him. The surroundings were silent, with only the night wind rustling the leaves of the trees. He still couldn't fully believe he had managed to defeat such a gigantic creature. His gaze fixed on the monster's empty eyes, bringing a mix of relief and unease. He reflected on the fight, recognizing that even though he had won, his survival was still not guaranteed. Exhaustion weighed on him, but the need to move forward was stronger. Even after the arduous battle and the defeat of the colossal monster, nothing had changed for him. His level remained unchanged, a cruel reminder of his unique condition. Frustration grew as he stared at the emptiness, reflecting on the immutable reality of his existence. The weight of uncertainty rested on his shoulders, but his clenched fist revealed that, despite it all, he had no intention of giving up. He moved cautiously along the underground path, trying to avoid being detected. However, he soon noticed the presence of strange creatures ahead. Small monsters resembling rabbits, but with an intimidating appearance, blocked his way. Surprised by this new challenge, he quickly adjusted his strategy, aware that he needed to move without drawing attention to survive in this hostile environment. As he advanced along the path, he noticed a strange detail: tree branches in an underground environment. Before he could react, a trap was triggered, and several creatures leapt toward him, surrounding him. However, due to the difficulties he had faced, he acquired the skills of trap detection and deactivation. With quick reflexes, he dodged the initial attack, preparing to face the unexpected threat. He realized that the movements of the creatures around him were much slower than before. The difference in speed seemed to be the result of his newly acquired skill, which had drastically increased his agility. Observing the enemy's attacks almost frozen before his eyes, he found a gap in the defense and prepared to counterattack confidently. Even with his increased speed, he realized that it still wasn't enough to dominate the fight completely. Determined to turn the tide, he intensified his attacks, launching quick and precise strikes against the creature in front of him. Each impact was followed by a fierce movement as he sought to exploit any opening in the enemy's defense. With a precise strike, he hit the creature directly, triggering a new skill acquired through experience. The impact of the fight made him realize that he could truly strengthen his techniques just by facing challenges. Excited by this discovery, he prepared to continue advancing, confident that each battle would bring new opportunities for growth. During the combat, his skills kept evolving. The strengthening of his bare-handed blows transformed into mastery of martial arts, reflecting his growing experience. New skills appeared spontaneously, including resistance to fear, resistance to pressure, and an emerging instinct for emergency evasion. Though his level remained unchanged, his body automatically responded to danger, allowing him to move with precision and confidence. He felt grateful for this unexpected growth, realizing he could continue advancing even without increasing his level conventionally. Determined to grow even more, he realized that if he kept up at this pace, he would be nothing but a burden to future companions in more difficult challenges. To avoid that fate, he decided to acquire as many skills as possible. Advancing in combat, he reaffirmed his belief that effort would be rewarded, channeling his determination to face enemies with even more fervor. He analyzed the materials he had collected, noticing that the magical stones were larger than expected. With a significant amount of resources stored, he decided that, for now, his goal was simply to survive and ensure he could leave the place with the materials he had obtained. Determined, he pressed forward, focused on finding an exit. Running toward the exit, he realized he was about to leave his first dungeon. Memories of his fight against the monster and his experience in the place flashed through his mind. With a sense of accomplishment and relief, he approached what seemed to be the end of his journey in that place. After leaving the dungeon, he found himself in a familiar environment, but soon realized the presence of a girl. With a serious look, she stared at him before letting out a sudden scream, surprising him. The shock made her lose her balance and fall, while he, still confused by the situation, tried to understand what was happening. He realized he was in a reception area, and the receptionist, still startled, complained that he had arrived without notice. Confused, he recognized her from somewhere, and she soon confirmed that he had been there the day before. Surprised, he realized he had been unconscious for an entire day in the dungeon, reflecting on how risky his experience had been. As he tried to process the situation, the employee questioned what he was doing there now. He kept trying to understand his situation as he realized he had been unconscious for an entire day. The receptionist confirmed that he had been there the day before, further increasing his surprise. While processing the information, he reflected on how he had managed to survive in the dungeon. The employee, still intrigued, questioned what he was doing there now. The employee noticed that he didn't have a license and suggested he obtain one. She explained that the license had several uses and offered more information on the subject. Hesitant, he finally agreed. The receptionist, excited, presented a mysterious box and asked him to put his hand inside to start the process. When he placed his hand inside the box, black smoke began to emerge, surprising the receptionist. Confused, she asked what was happening. The young man smiled and revealed that, since birth, his level had been 0. The revelation shocked the receptionist, who struggled to process the information. Not knowing how to react, she apologized for overreacting. However, the news spread quickly, leaving those nearby in disbelief. After the test, a symbol appeared on the young man's hand, confirming his approval as an explorer. The receptionist smiled and congratulated him, declaring that he was now a true explorer. He reflected that, even without defeating powerful monsters, he could collect small magical stones and sell them for money. In his mind, he thought this would help the family finances and allow him to buy things his sister liked. After becoming an explorer, the young man celebrated excitedly. On the exploration ranking, a new record surprised everyone. A newcomer had taken the first place with an impressive amount of points. However, the name displayed in the ranking appeared as. Meanwhile, another young man observed the news from afar, reflecting on his own situation and wishing he could one day enter the ranking. With the sudden appearance of the mysterious in the ranking, the world underwent an unexpected change. No one knew what it meant, not even the unknown individual themselves. The impact of this event intrigued everyone, and suspicious and curious glances turned toward him, trying to understand the extent of this anomaly. Hinata Suzuki, a level 0 explorer and rank F, considered the weakest in the world, had managed to complete the beginner dungeon. With that, he made his official debut as an explorer and now sought to exchange the items he had collected for money. Upon arriving at the shopping center, he tried to evaluate one of the magical stones he had acquired in the dungeon. However, the result was unexpected. The magical stone received a rank X classification and couldn't be evaluated. Surprised and confused, Hinata questioned the impossibility of identifying the value of the item, not understanding what that meant. Hinata Suzuki tried to sell the materials he had collected in the dungeon, but the evaluation machine rejected all the items. The rank X magical stone, the unknown skin, and the mysterious bones were classified as impossible to evaluate. Confused, he tested another item, but the result was the same. The machine suggested that, in such cases, the buyer should consult the rare item center. Faced with this situation, he began to question whether the machine was faulty or if his items were truly so rare that they couldn't be identified. Hinata Suzuki finally managed to sell one of his magical stones and was surprised to discover that the stone from a rare magical rabbit was worth 300,000 yen. Shocked by the value, he reflected on the impact of suddenly gaining so much money, especially as a high school student. Deciding to act cautiously, he chose to sell only one unit for now. The transaction was completed, and he received the payment. Feeling the weight of exhaustion after everything he had gone through, he left the place with the intention of resting. Hinata finally returned home and was greeted by Seino, who expressed relief upon seeing him back. He explained that he had been trapped in the dungeon and couldn't return earlier. Despite her concern, she reassured him, saying she believed in him but asked him not to overdo things and prioritize his safety above all else. Hinata realized just how dirty he was after his journey in the dungeon, surprised by his own worn appearance. Seino, seeing him in this state, commented that anyone would believe his words just by looking at him. With a warm look, she congratulated Hinata on his achievement, calling him Explorer Suzuki, which took the young man completely by surprise. Hinata reflected on his recent achievement of becoming an explorer, expressing deep gratitude. Seino, maintaining her serene demeanor, just watched him. While washing his clothes in the laundry, he noticed a large stain and was asked if he had returned from a dungeon. Although he thought Seino was a bit cold, he couldn't help but notice the beauty of her smile. Hinata introduced himself to Fuji Hiroto, a friendly classmate who reassured him about the mess he had accumulated on his journey, explaining that everyone goes through this at the beginning. When asked about the dungeon he explored, Hinata revealed that he was forced to enter the E-rank dungeon 117, surprising Hiroto. Despite the difficulties, he had managed to return safely. Hiroto, impressed, commented that most people prefer starting with D-rank dungeons. Hiroto was surprised to learn that Hinata explored the dungeon alone, warning about the dangers, even in an E-rank area. He suggested it would be safer to go in a group. Showing goodwill, Hiroto offered to accompany Hinata next time, even admitting he wasn't very strong but believing he could be useful. Hinata agreed to the idea and reflected on Hiroto's kindness, thinking that maybe one day he could be useful to someone too. The school day was coming to an end when Hinata was approached by Kai, a classmate with an intimidating presence. Calling him level 0, Kai demanded Hinata follow him for a moment. Surprised and nervous, Hinata hesitated but forced a smile and agreed to follow, unsure of what to expect. Hinata walked alongside Kai, his former high school peer, now someone he viewed as a symbol of terror. In the past, Kai always looked down on him and bullied him, but something had changed. Thanks to the skills he had acquired, such as resistance to fear and bullying, Hinata no longer felt the same intimidation. As Kai called him hesitantly, Hinata reflected on his own growth, determined to keep pushing forward, regardless of staying level 0 forever. Kai lunged at Hinata with a powerful punch, declaring the start of the fight. However, to Hinata's surprise, the attack appeared incredibly slow. his eyes fixed on the fist coming toward him, and his body instinctively reacted, dodging with ease. Kai, realizing his punch had failed, screamed in frustration, while the onlookers stared in disbelief at Hinata's unexpected speed and reflexes. Kai stepped back in fury after his failed punch, unable to comprehend what had happened. In the past, this punch would terrify Hinata, but now, after facing more powerful enemies in the dungeon, he saw that Kai's attack was much weaker than the ones he had encountered. With a determined look, Hinata took an offensive stance, ready to counterattack, while Kai, surprised, prepared to react. Hinata easily repelled Kai's blow, surprising his opponent. Upon impact, a cold sensation spread throughout Hinata's body, resulting in the acquisition of the cold resistance skill due to intense exposure. As he tried to understand what was happening, an imposing young woman approached with a serious look. Kai, irritated, insisted that the fight didn't concern her, but his expression changed upon realizing the presence of the girl. In a firm tone, she ordered the fight to stop without hesitation. Hinata, still processing the events, was surprised to hear his name being called by another student. The tension in the air increased as Kai seemed displeased with the interruption. Kai, furious at how things had unfolded, cast a threatening glance at Hinata, promising he would remember this. His behavior was unusual, especially for someone who ranked among the top 10. Hinata, surprised, had never seen him act like this before. As Kai walked away, Hinata thanked the young woman, Camui, for her intervention. However, her serious expression showed no reaction to his gratitude, leaving him uncertain about the situation. Confused, Hinata wondered if he should have apologized but couldn't understand why. Watching the scene, another student commented that they were beginning to understand what Camui had meant earlier, hinting that a woman's heart was complicated. As Hinata tried to process everything, uncertainty remained evident in his expression. A wave of ice spread violently through the environment, emanating from Camui's figure. Hinata was forced to retreat, shielding himself from the intense icy current. The ground around him began to freeze rapidly, making his movements harder. As he tried to understand the situation, a notification appeared before him, informing him that he had acquired the resistance to freezing skill due to high exposure to extreme cold. Shock and confusion took over his thoughts. Was he really being attacked? Or was this some sort of unexpected test? Nearby structures began to be covered in ice, reinforcing the seriousness of what was happening. Hinata realized he needed to react quickly before the situation worsened further. A stream of cold air enveloped the environment, making the air almost cut through. Camui stood motionless at the center of the ice storm, her presence emanating overwhelming pressure. Hinata could barely withstand the intense cold and realized that, without the resistance to freezing skill, he could have succumbed at that moment. He wondered why Camui was there. What did she want? Why was she attacking with such power? Something felt off, and he needed to understand the situation quickly before it was too late. Hinata felt the biting cold intensifying every second. He knew he couldn't stay exposed to that extreme temperature for much longer. His body trembled as he tried to open a nearby door, but the frozen metal structure prevented any easy movement. Not understanding why Camui had attacked, he needed to find a way to escape. His instincts screamed that staying there meant death. He gathered his strength and charged in the opposite direction, looking for an exit while Camui's imposing figure remained still at the center of the freezing storm. Hinata moved quickly, aware that he couldn't just run away from the situation. His body reacted instinctively as he prepared to defend himself. Camui maintained her imposing posture, but something in her expression indicated surprise at the unexpected resistance. Hinata's movements were precise, driven by the need to survive. He didn't want to attack, just protect himself. However, in the heat of the confrontation, an unexpected impact caused Camui to hesitate for a moment. Something was about to change. Camui, visibly shaken, started to tremble as tears streamed down her face. The tension in the battle broke when she, overwhelmed by fear and guilt, apologized desperately. Hinata, surprised, couldn't hide his shock at the unexpected scene. He hesitated, watching Camui emotionally collapse. Her expression alternated between confusion and concern as she tried to understand what had happened. The warrior, who had once exuded strength and determination, was now vulnerable, consumed by panic. She admitted that she was afraid and couldn't handle it. The situation took an unexpected turn, leaving Hinata and the onlookers speechless. What had caused Camui to reach this state? Camui stared intently at Hinata, trying to process what had happened. Something inside her told her that he was different. Her heart was still racing from the shock of the fight, and now the truth seemed to become clearer. While Hinata awkwardly apologized, the scene seemed absurd to those watching. Camui questioned how someone called Level 0 could exhibit so much power. Something was wrong. No one, not even the teachers, had noticed his true nature. Secretly, he had been hiding his strength all along. On the other side, Kai and the other students were still trying to understand what they had just witnessed. For Camui, what intrigued her most was how Kai had dared provoke someone like Hinata. The situation had spiraled out of control, and the only certainty left was that this was not normal. Camui's fear caused her to release her latent S-rank skill, Blessing of the God of Ice. The powerful cold energy emanated from her body uncontrollably, instantly freezing anyone it touched. She had trained to contain this power, but any slip-up resulted in dangerous leaks of cold, harming those around her. However, her opponent surprised her. Hinata received her attack directly and didn't freeze. He not only resisted the extreme cold but also advanced without hesitation. For Camui, this could only mean one thing: Hinata saw her as an enemy. Camui's terror overtook her. She didn't want to die, but the situation was spiraling out of control. Chaotic thoughts consumed her as she tried to decide what to do. Sitting on the ground, she cried, overwhelmed with despair. Her body trembled, no longer from the cold but from fear and uncertainty. Hinata, confused, watched the scene. He tried to understand why she was behaving this way. Was it because of the confrontation with Kai? Or was it something deeper? Camui remained sitting on the ground, sobbing as she tried to explain the reason for her hesitation. She feared losing control and releasing a destructive power, something that could cause irreversible damage. The fear stopped her from attacking, and now she felt burdened by guilt and confusion. Hinata watched, shocked to realize that even with all the fear, she had gone through this terrifying experience because of him. The understanding weighed heavily on him as he saw Camui's vulnerability. With a deep sigh, he approached, trying to calm the situation. His hand gently touched her head, a silent gesture of comfort and understanding. Camui, still trembling, accepted the gesture without resistance. The tension in the air began to dissipate. Hinata, still nervous about the situation, took a handkerchief and carefully wiped Camui's tears. Her eyes widened at the unexpected gesture, and her face flushed slightly. The silence between them was filled with surprise and emotion. He averted his gaze, unsure of how to handle the situation, and murmured hesitant words. He felt completely responsible for what had happened, and his expression reflected the guilt he carried. With a slightly awkward smile, he tried to offer help in some way, making it clear that he would do anything to make up for what had happened. Camui, still processing the moment, watched him in silence, unsure of how to respond. Hinata, still a bit nervous, expressed his gratitude to Camui for helping him. With a hesitant smile, he promised to do everything he could to repay the favor, offering his help in any way possible. Camui, surprised by his sincerity and determination, observed his anxious expression. To her, Hinata's unexpected kindness seemed confusing and hard to comprehend. Used to keeping her distance from others, she wondered why someone like him was being so kind to her. Meanwhile, Hinata tried to reinforce his words, assuring her that he would do his best to help her. His clumsy yet sincere demeanor only made the situation seem stranger to Camui, who continued to reflect on his unexpected attitude. Camui looked at Hinata with uncertainty, still trying to process his words. Her gaze, once filled with distrust, now showed a slight vulnerability. Holding a handkerchief against her face, she tried to hide the blush that spread across her cheeks. Hinata, with his back to her, nodded timidly, confirming his offer without being able to look her in the eye. His nervousness was evident, but he stood firm in his decision. As the sun set on the horizon, Camui, still hesitant, finally broke the silence. With an uncertain tone, she asked if she could make a request of Hinata. The doubt lingered in the air, leaving a mystery about what exactly she would ask.